Welcome to the Haunted Hills podcast, True Crime from Yallourn. I'm your host, Tegan Dawson. Firstly, I want to let you know the traditional custodians of the country we're discussing today is the Barakalong people of the Gunai Nation. When Haunted Hills looks at crimes, it's a reflection on the past, the values, timeliness, and sense of justice. While I encourage people to play judge and jury, we're not re-adjudicating these crimes. Most of them occurred too long ago for that to be appropriate. The offences covered reflect the rural nature of our towns, shedding light on people we don't usually talk about, and what is and was considered criminal. Yallourn was a perfect garden city, designed with grand ideals of equality. Although, the number of strikes and more beautiful homes given to managers and white-collar workers doesn't precisely scream equality. Does this have an impact on the kinds of crimes or people who were criminalised in Yallourn? Let's investigate. At 1:30 in the morning, 11 October 1939, Senior Constable Mason was called by Mr. Darlingson, the night watchman, because he had seen two people skulking around the State Electricity Commission. He waited until the policeman arrived, and walked him in the direction of where the two men had disappeared. They were about to give up the chase when they rounded the back of the drapery store. On the street they saw a man. Mason ordered him to stop. The man did not, and continued walking away. Police chased him and caught his arm, asking for his name and address. Again, the man refused to comply and placed his hands in his pockets. What do you think should happen? The Latrobe Valley Paranormal Detectives said the maximum punishment now is 2 years in jail by the Victorian Summary Offences Act, Section 49B. Not that that happens very often, usually it's just a fine. When the police unholstered his gun and shot Norman in the stomach. Norman said he was on his way home from a friend's house and had not done anything wrong. That's after the two men took him to the hospital, where the doctors stabilised him and saved his life. The very next day, the Yallourn police station put out a statement saying it was a regrettable incident. No charges were laid. Norman had recently come to town from Bendigo. He'd been working in Yallourn since 1937, so about 2 years, and according to electoral rolls, worked in sales at the SEC. This also provided him with a house in town. He stayed in the area until 1944, when he returned home to Bendigo, married Phyllis, had 3 children, and then moved on again. Norman was described as a proud and independent man on his headstone, missed by his children. He died in 1989, and according to the records available, never crossed the law again. And one has to ask, had he crossed it that night? So, I had a millennial moment when I saw his photo. I thought he had to look like a celebrity. Unfortunately, these modern match machines aren't loaded with the historic actors he may remind me of, that I can't quite place. Instead, it says he has a 43.8% match with Randy Cade. Vandalism. The Yallourn Square in between the boulevard had experienced vandalism before, but not quite like this. In April 1938, in the Yallourn town centre, 3 young men continued drinking after the pub shut. John, a 20-year-old labourer, Vincent, his brother, a linesman assistant, 24, lived out at Hearns Oak with their mother. Reg, 23, lived at Hazelwood South and worked as a labourer. They were drinking in the band rotunda. As they drank, they thought it was a good idea to pull up benches and tear down pipes. Strew them all over the flower beds. They even broke the playground, including the children's seesaw. The total damage costs came to £5. Sergeant Collier, the police constable from the history episode, found the destruction the next morning as he walked. After an investigation, the police discovered these 3 men were the last seen in the rotunda. Constable Shine interviewed the 3 men. Initially, the men informed him they had been drinking and claimed no knowledge of the damage. However, in a subsequent interview, they asked if there was a way this could be solved without going to court, and offered to pay restoration. What do you think should happen? Latrobe Valley Paranormal Detectives said these guys should be made to fix everything they broke, or otherwise paying a fine and a fee to get everything fixed. They were put on the docket at the Morwell Court of Petty Sessions, where Sergeant William Collier conducted the prosecution on 8 June 1938. They were convicted and charged £5, with £1 13 shillings and change court costs. John was the sixth child born to Charles and Cecilia. His last brother was born when he was 4 years old. At 9 years old, his father died. When he was 17, his older sister Rubina, who lived in Yallourn, died at 25. Vincent, John's older brother by 4 years and the fifth-born child, experienced similar things to his brother, just as he was older. The third young man that night was Reg, originally born in England in 1915. His mother died within a month of his birth. At 5 months old, his father sent him with his auntie to Australia with 3 cousins. Meanwhile, his father, a storekeeper, stayed behind, remarried in 1918, and came to Australia in 1924. The very next year after their offences, each of these men signed up to serve in World War II. Before embarking in 1940, Reg married Joyce. A case of bullying. In March 1927, the men of the SEC went on strike, saying a shift boss was treating them poorly, swearing at them and bullying them. Considering the times and workplace culture, this was probably very bad. The strike resulted in a suspension, and the men returned to work. The SEC organised an investigation. Mr. Holloway was their representative from the Melbourne branch of the trades union. The shift supervisor alleged the workers arrived drunk and did not do the tasks assigned to them. I asked the listeners what they thought should happen. Latrobe Valley paranormal detectives said the foreman should definitely be investigated and charged with workplace abuse. How this case was resolved. Sir John Monash was one of the commissioners who oversaw this investigation. He wrote a finding for the commission. We find the charges against shift boss Bamborough of having bullied the men and used abusive language have not been justified. The number of instances of such alleged conduct which were attempted to be proved by the evidence were astonishingly few, and these few were widely separated in point of time, making it clear that whatever just cause of complaint might have existed was confined to a few instances and was not of a general and continuous nature. No single instance of personal abuse by the shift boss of any man or men was satisfactorily established. The evidence went no further than to allege the shift boss, or at occasional times of stress, used coarse and vulgar language of a nature which is, unfortunately, common on works, and which, admittedly, habitually used by the men themselves. And in cases where this did occur, vulgar words were offered, there was good reason to infer provocative action by the men. Reason to infer provocative action by the men involved. In fact, in regards to several instances, witnesses admitted that they indulged in identical language to the shift boss. As regards to the charge of bullying, the rarity of instances alleged destroyed any theory of such bullying, if practiced at all, was either general. On each such occasion, there had been an accident or mishap, and all concerned were quite naturally excited with nerves and on edge. On the contrary of evidence, the men themselves satisfied us that shift boss, although there may be justification for questioning his methods, throughout as a zealous, energetic superior striving for efficiency of operation and smooth working of the plant. While we have reached the conclusions set forth, we consider, having regard to upheaval which has recently taken place, that the bad feelings between the shift boss and the men necessarily resulting from the inquiry not be fair to either the shift boss or the men concerned, especially in the public interest, to require them again to work together, and that efficient working under such conditions would be impossible. The Commission will therefore take steps to make use of Mr. Bamborough's services in another capacity, relying upon the assurance by Mr. Holloway, the union's representative, that the men will loyally abide by such actions. The next crime, inciting someone to resist arrest. The pub had let out some 30 minutes prior. The sun was still up, this summer evening on the 13th of December 1924. At 6:30 p.m, 50 men were gathered near Henry's shop on Tarwin Street, Morwell, awaiting taxis to Yallourn and other nearby towns. Police received word one of the men was particularly drunk and disorderly, a labourer, Jock, employed by the SEC, who rented a property in Yallourn. Constable Suckling came to see and determined Jock too drunk and disorderly. He took him into custody. This amplified Jock's behaviour. He thrashed about and in the process dislocated the police officer's thumb. The rest of the men protested this arrest, saying Jock should resist arrest. Constable O'Donnell arrived on scene. Albert, another employee living and working in Yallourn, shouted out, "Don't go, Jock! Stand your dig!" He did not appreciate what he saw and reached out, grabbing a constable's arm to stop them taking Jock. He also shouted at the police officer and grabbed one of the constable's arms. "Don't strike him like that, you'll injure him for life." The prisoner, as they were called at the time, was said to have been struggling, which was true. The group of men followed the police, calling out after them as they turned onto Commercial Road. A vehicle was given to the police at Hare's Garage to escape the throng of men who followed. Jock's charges were resisting arrest, assaulting a police officer, and obscene language. It's interesting that drunk and disorderly is not one of the charges. Albert was also charged with inciting a person to resist arrest. What do you think should happen? The Latrobe Valley paranormal detective said, "Sounds like a normal day in Morwell, lol. But seriously, grabbing a constable's arm might be seen as assaulting a police officer, so he may get jail time." At court, Jock informed he did not know what he was doing due to the levels of drink in his system. The court promptly informed him intoxication was not an excuse for bad behaviour. He was fined £5 and court costs of £1 and 11 shillings. Albert, for inciting someone to resist arrest, was fined £4 and a bit. If defaulted, he would spend 3 days in prison. McGinty, 24, living in Yallourn at the time. He'd moved up from Tasmania. He wasn't very good at keeping up with his electoral registrations. He didn't have a car or his own horse. However, he travelled extensively throughout the Latrobe Valley, using other people's horses. It was on 31 January 1923. McGinty saw a horse tied to a picket fence outside a property in Church Street, Traralgon. It was just after 4:30 in the afternoon. He untied, saddled up the nearby gear, and left. William Christensen, having completed his plumbing work, came out to leave, and his mare was not where he'd left it. He looked down towards K Street and saw a man atop a mare. He reported the missing horse, worth £11, and the saddle and bridle, worth £6, to police. At about 5 p.m, a farmer at Maryvale said he saw the man with muddied clothes, who'd told him he'd come up from Sale. He had left in the direction of Yallourn, with a sugar bag the farmer provided beneath the saddle. The next day, police found the horse in Yallourn at Catherine's property, where he'd asked permission to leave it. Albert James had seen him and said, "That horse is worth a tenner," to which William agreed. McGinty agreed. And told Albert it would do him no good, as he has no horsemanship skills. Albert said McGinty was drunk. McGinty had taken the saddle and bridle with him. What do you think should happen? I asked the listeners what they thought should happen. The Latrobe Valley paranormal detective said, "Don't you hate it when you misplace your horse? Lol. Probably a fine." How the court dealt with this. Well, by the time the police caught up with McGinty, he was also charged with cattle stealing and other crimes, including this horse theft. So he was sentenced to 6 months. He spent this time in Sale prison. McGinty was a young man with an extensive criminal record. He was born in Tasmania and trained as a cook. He had a number of aliases: William Kelly, William McGinty, William Arthur McGinty. At 17 years of age, on Marine Terrace, he swore in the doorway of a public hall where ladies' ears were within hearing. 2 days later, drunk, skulking around the stables, a local merchant was loading a carriage. The pants were out, and William took a pair, shoving them under his vest. He tripped over his feet trying to leave in a hurry, dropping the pants. The merchant witnessed this and told him to stop. William grabbed the dropped pants and ran off again. This time his feet took him all the way back to a paddock nearby where he was staying, where he planted them beneath a tree. The pants were worth 25 shillings. A trooper found McGinty shortly after the notification of the theft and placed him in the lockup awaiting a hearing. He'd been there for a day. It appears he was treated okay. Permitted to sit on his cell stoop, he was there while the prison guard left to get pudding and scone for dinner, until the jailer was out of sight. William free ran up the wall with the aid of a rubbish crate. He reached the top of the 12-foot walls, then dropped down on the other side. A few hours later, he was recaptured when spotted by a member of the search party. This got him in front of a judge very quickly, where he faced 3 charges: obscene language, larceny for the pants, and jailbreak. He admitted guilt to all 3 charges. For obscene language, he received a £1 fine, with a jail term of 7 days if he defaulted on the fine. For the stolen pants, he was sentenced to 7 days imprisonment. The court informed this was lenient due to the factor of him being drunk, and they would have given him a month for soberly stealing the slacks. Concerning the jailbreak, it was described as a mean, despicable trick not worthy of a man being fairly treated. The court informed him that they could impose a 3-year sentence, which included solitary confinement. William burst into tears at the news. With a warning to do better, the judge actually imposed a 1-month term of imprisonment. He told the court he was 19 years old. It's really hard to know how old he was because of all the aliases, and trying to track back his family history is difficult. This was in 1916. In 1919, he was charged with using bad language again, while also begging in the streets. This time he was sentenced to 6 weeks imprisonment, and a conviction was recorded for the cussing. In 1920, he escaped from prison precisely the same way he had 4 years earlier. When he was caught, he informed he would have disappeared onto the ferry in women's clothes the next day. In 1926, he stole a suitcase from the homeopathic hospital, which had been in the office for 1 month. So, the next crime technically occurs in the Brown coal mine. William King's grocery store was an agent for the State Savings Bank. It was this cash box, the one representing the bank, which was stolen in 1940. Dudley was responsible for the store at the time the cash box went missing. When William discovered it missing, he asked for help, and Dudley and his wife searched for the cash box. William informed the manager of the State Savings Bank at Morwell it was missing. It had contained at the time £63, 3 shillings and 11 dimes. Later that day, William searched again and found the box under the spare bed in their property. He reported this to police. William was disappointed because he believed Dudley, who'd worked for him the past 9 months, and showed himself to be trustworthy up until this day, because he had regularly worked with the cash and made runs to the bank. Dudley, when interviewed, first said either William or his wife could have stolen the safe, because it was found in their house. He ended up admitting he had gambling debts go over his head and he owed £60. This was his first offence. What do you think should happen? The Latrobe Valley Paranormal detectives said, cheeky, but depends on what they stole. How the court dealt with this. He was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment. Wholly suspended if he paid a bond of £10. So, alcohol was a really big deal and massive issue in the area, which is why the State Electricity Commission worked so hard to get a hotel on site in 1927. So we're going to have a look at a few alcohol-related crimes, as we did in the Haunted Hills and Brown Coal Mine. So Archie was parked in St. Thomas's car park on the night of one of the dances. While he was there, a local police officer came by and shined his torch in the passenger side of the car, revealing 8 pieces of contraband. 8 bottles of beer. He was taken before a judge and charged with being in possession of alcohol near a dance hall, with one of the containers being used as evidence. He told the judge that the bottles were for his buddies who were heading out to war. He asked the judge for his beer back, and he got it. It's really odd that he got his beer back, although they could not determine he was selling it, which is the definition of sly grog. So before there was crystal meth, there was methylated spirits. How do you think drinking the substance was handled by the courts? Should it be a criminal offence, or is there another way to deal with this? The Latrobe Valley paranormal detective said, "I would think that drinking it would be punishment enough. I do know that fines were given out to sly grog shanties for adding it to other alcohols though." Oh yeah, adding it without the knowledge of patrons should be an offence, because that's akin to poison. Especially, methylated spirits, ugh. A man had a glass of methylated spirits and water. He was also intoxicated. There were open bottles of wine around when the police arrived at his cubicle in the brown coal mine. The man protested, saying he was using the metho to treat his feet, and offered to show the judge his foot. This was not accepted. He was convicted of drinking metho and fined £5. He was also convicted of being drunk, but there was no punishment for that. In 1943, the Yallourn court had 2 men on charges of drunk and disorderly, including drinking methylated spirits. One of the men said he was a medical student, and his mug of coffee and methylated spirits was a hangover cure. The second man was lying on a bed in a very bad state, saying he'd never been as drunk as this before. The men were sentenced to 6 weeks imprisonment. The paper also noted 3 other people were serving sentences for having drunk methylated spirits in the Sale jail at the time. This next case, bigamy. It didn't technically occur in Yallourn, but you'll see how it ties in. George, at 19 years of age, married Elizabeth Marie, 17, in Carlton. They had 2 children. He was working as an electrician for the Stonington Council. On 1 June 1922, he lost his job with the council. He told Elizabeth he was going to Yallourn to look for work, and would send for her and the kids when he obtained work and a home. Over the past 12 months, while working for the council, he'd frequented a restaurant in South Morang, where he'd met Charlotte and developed a very strong crush on her. He pursued her, informing her he was a single man. He convinced her to get married at the matrimony office in Collins Street on 3 June 1922, just 2 days after he lost his job with the council. Because he had no funds and was on hard times, he posed as an electrical inspector for the supply company at the Berth, Sheese and Felsted warehouse, where he stole £250 worth of silver cutlery. Berth, Sheese and Felsted was a company that publishes books and sold household goods like drapery and kitchen items. When the police caught him for this crime, he informed them he was trying to cover the costs of running 2 homes while unemployed. This is how they discovered he was a bigamist. I asked the listeners what they thought should happen. The Latrobe Valley paranormal detective said a 5-year prison sentence is the current maximum punishment since 1961. So, how do we think that they dealt with it in 1922? George was held in remand in the Melbourne jail during the time the police caught him around the 22nd of June 1922. The judge said to him, "George destroyed this young woman's life by fraud." The judge was also very unimpressed with the deception posing as an electricity company employee to gain access to the warehouse to steal goods. The judge also informed George had not provided a reason for the bigamy. A 12-month sentence was imposed for the bigamy and 6 months for the stealing. However, these would be served cumulative, which means his total time in prison would be 12 months. How Elizabeth dealt with this crime. Elizabeth forgave George, and they stayed married until they died in 1952. George served in World War II, and Elizabeth was his next of kin. Early Saturday morning, 10 April 1948, a break-in occurred at Dr. James Moore Andrews' home. The intruder entered the garage and took the doctor's bag out of the car. Thankfully, they left the car. However, the bag contained valuable surgical tools, some which were historic and could not be replaced. There were also medications James described as dangerous in the hands of anyone other than a doctor. Patient records were also in there, which was a concern due to privacy. Unfortunately, this criminal was never apprehended, so we don't know how this would have been dealt with. Anyway, thank you listeners for your time and your ears. I hope you've had a fascinating journey through Yallourn small town criminals. Not all of them were small time. I hope wherever you were it was enlightening. The next bonus episode is the 1944 bushfire affecting the Yallourn area and the Royal Commission into it. This will form a chapter of an audiobook I'm working on about Yallourn. You can listen to it on the 5th of August at patreon.com/hauntedhills. There are other bonus episodes there too. 2 about bushrangers, more history and crime about Traralgon, a coin counterfeiter, and more. This podcast was produced, researched, written and narrated by me, Tegan Dawson, on Gunno-Curno land in Moe, Victoria. Haunted Hills acknowledges right-along people of the Gunno-Curno Nation who are the traditional custodians of the land they operate on. Much of the country they speak of is Aboriginal land, always was, always is. We respect the elders, people, culture, past, present, and hope for a positive future on all these lands that was never ceded. The intro and outro music by Aaron Austin Music. Next time on Haunted Hills, we'll be telling the ghost stories of Yallourn. This small town has big stories. I appreciate you all. Thank you again. Be kind, thoughtful, stay safe.